John Rasmus here, and I'm here for a little bit of a ghost story. All right, the top 5 most haunted locations inside of the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. I tweeted this, but before someone takes the idea, I want to make a video showcasing what I know about these 5 locations. In the previous video, I did talk about the Comedy Store and the ghosts of the Comedy Store, but I said what Joe Rogan said, the assumption that maybe Bugsy Siegel ran the joint. Bugsy Siegel likely did not, but an associate of Bugsy Siegel, gangster Mickey Cohen, had an office in the upstairs of the former incarnation of the Comedy Store, also known as Ciro's. Ciro's was the hottest club in Los Angeles. From Marilyn Monroe to James Dean, everyone went there. We're talking the after party for Citizen Kane was at Ciro's. It was the place to be. This was in the 40s and 50s, Ciro's. And then it was a rock club during the 60s. And in 1972, it was reopened as the Comedy Store that we all know. The legend of the biggest comedians coming out of there, like Robin Williams, David Letterman, Jim Carrey, and Sam Kinison is the comedian I mentioned in the last video. So the 5 most haunted locations inside of the Comedy Store are as follows, according to me, after doing some research. Number 5, the original stage is haunted. The ghost that haunts the Comedy Store is very territorial of who is even worthy to be on that stage. Sam Kinison, a very famous comedian. His life was cut short at the age of 38. Very sad story. But before he was famous, he was sleeping on that stage, and the other comedian with him saw. He woke to see Sam Kinison upside down, levitating 4 feet off the ground, according to this other comedian. This is not a joke, it's not a punchline. It happened. According to him, he told this story to Bobby Lee, a regular at the Comedy Store for 20 years. So you pretty much have to really be a regular for 20 years, sometimes before you can even extract these type of stories out of these Comedy Store alumni comedians. That would be the least haunted, yet still very haunted stage. Possibly the stage that other comedians described feeling a ghostly presence while they're trying to perform. The number 4 most haunted location at the Comedy Store, the hallways. Generically speaking, the hallways. Now, there's supposedly a most haunted hallway between the main stage and the original stage, perhaps behind the curtains. That is where, supposedly, a comedian was levitated off the ground to the point where he hit his head on the ceiling, and one of his spines was ruptured. He had to go to the hospital, get spinal surgery. Kind of a serious thing. I was able to investigate and research and find this comedian making a joke about his spine. So whether we know it was that or not, that's the story Bobby Lee did repeat. And he heard it. It's like a telephone game. You can either accept it or reject it, but I tend to believe the Comedy Store is haunted. So the hallways. There was also a metal separator, gate type thing in one of the hallways that a couple comedians saw bend out by itself, as if a bunch of ghosts are walking in and they're bending the barrier there. The hallways, generally speaking, tend to be eerie to people that do frequent the Comedy Store. Then again, comedians that have been there for 20 years can be diehard disbelievers, claim to have no experience with ghosts. There are many stories I didn't mention, but I'll save those for a future video. The number 3 most haunted location at the Comedy Store would be the Belly Room. The Belly Room was closed off for a long time. Mitzi Shore opened it up, and the first wave of comedians to really use it to the best potential that Mitzi wanted it for, a lot of female comedians were featured there. And the female comedians, they felt like, hey, the men get the original stage and we have to be upstairs in this belly room? What's up with that? And it was called the belly room because back in the day when it was Ciro's, apparently belly dancers gave shows to the VIP. So people that go to the belly room sometimes sense something strange. On top of that, Bobby Lee said that comedians wearing purple hooded cloaks, sometimes, at least one time, he witnessed perform seances in the belly room. So perhaps the belly room is some type of vortex, perhaps it's some type of seance room. And supposedly they were trying to contact the spirit of Andy Kaufman in the belly room. They had candles, they were in a circle doing a seance, and whether they were successful or not, we don't know. Those stories are kept and guarded in secret. Bobby Lee was barely able to sneak a peek, and he saw them in their purple hooded robes and waited. This is way late at night, 4 a.m., 3 a.m. He waited until the seance was over so he could see who was in attendance. And he saw Lily Tomlin among a few others, but she was the most prominent comedian to be in attendance, summoning the spirit of Andy Kaufman. We don't know. Perhaps they were summoning just the spirit that's normally there, Gus. Number 2, the most haunted number 2 location of the Comedy Store, the basement. Mickey Cohen supposedly killed people in the basement who, for gangster reasons, crossed him in one way or another. Countless people. Supposedly other things took place which I don't want to mention. But ghost investigators did get some footage in the basement. Few and far between. I would say they were amateur ghost investigators, but people would say the same thing about me, so I'm not dissing them. They were lucky to get that opportunity to investigate, and they did capture some unusual things in the basement. Supposedly people hear voices coming from the basement, maybe even screams, growls. Now, when you hear a growl coming from nowhere, a snarl, a growl, that's a demon. That's classic demon. Scary stuff. At least this is what I've learned from watching different ghost investigation shows. Do they hype it up? Maybe. But this is classic information. Growls and snarls are always seemingly a negative entity kind of hissing at a human entering its domain. One of the regulars of the Comedy Store was told to go in the basement. He went down there and he saw a shadow figure, a huge featureless shadow figure. And he said he never went in the basement ever again after that. It scared him too much. So the basement is definitely haunted. But the number 1 location in the Comedy Store, the most haunted location, would have to be the office upstairs. Some spirits prefer upstairs to downstairs. And this spirit who seems to run the spiritual plane of the Comedy Store dresses in a tuxedo, dresses in a really nice suit, wears a nice hat. I think his base of operations, based on the stories, is the office upstairs that the owner, Mitzi Shore, rest in peace, had closed and locked for 30 years straight. She wouldn't even go in there. No one would go in there. Bobby Lee said she would hire, on occasion, exorcist-type shamans and psychics and mediums to try to cleanse the place, and it never worked. Year after year, she tried it over and over. Never worked. Because notorious gangster Mickey Cohen used that office, perhaps he did some brutal things in that office, and perhaps the entity that is there has taken on the persona of Mickey Cohen the gangster and continues to run his place, his way. A lot of poltergeist activity supposedly takes place in the office. Locked off, closed. So those are the 5 most haunted locations in the Comedy Store, according to the stories I've heard here and there. Levitating ashtrays, stools moving across the stage by themselves. Joey Diaz saw a figure in a suit with a cloak that hid its face and disappeared. There are many other stories. The ballroom of a bunch of ghosts dancing on the main floor. Story after story. I'm fascinated by the spirit aspect of the Comedy Store and the comedy side, most definitely. But Bobby Lee said he saw a ghost with his friend, both witnessing in the window of the parking lot at around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. He saw a ghost in the window with his hands pressed against the glass with a glowing face of all things. Perhaps something like this. Yikes, that's pretty freaky. And that window is probably in close proximity to the upstairs office. Here is the window that Bobby Lee saw Gus the Ghost at in the video game Grand Theft Auto 5. Here I am at the Comedy Store, Grand Theft Auto 5. I want to see if they have that window in the parking lot. You can see it. And there it is. There is the window in Grand Theft Auto 5. I hope you enjoyed this video. More videos coming soon. They're not all going to be about the Comedy Store, but I'm fascinated by the history of the Comedy Store. I will be visiting it in the near future. I'm editing many new episodes on ghost investigations. I'm trying to show you when something happens as opposed to when nothing happens. But I'm 100% honest about my results. If nothing happens, nothing happened. Many factors, unknown factors, we don't know. It's not a perfect science, obviously. I'm a fan of science, but I'm also a fan of the spiritual, the things that are unseen. Until next time, I thank you for watching. This has been John Rasmus. Be seeing you.